You're not special. I can find 48 more. The billionaire smirked. Go ahead. She walked out cold. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. Mara Ellison stands in front of a glass tower that looks like it was built to remind people exactly where they rank. The kind of building where even the revolving doors feel expensive, and for a second she considers turning around, not because she is afraid of the job, but because she is tired of the way the world looks through polished windows. Like anyone without money is a smudge you can wipe away. The wind off the avenue bites through her thrift store coat, and she tightens her grip on a manila folder that has been opened and closed so many times the edges have gone soft. Inside is a resume printed on the cheapest paper she could find, one page meant to represent an entire life, an entire fight, an entire month of counting dollars and pretending it does not hurt. She steps into the lobby anyway, because walking away has a cost too, and she has already paid plenty. The lobby is quiet in that particular way that means someone is paying a lot of money for silence. Marble floors, a minimalist fountain that whispers instead of splashes, a guard in a crisp suit who looks at her like he is scanning for trouble. Mara gives a polite smile that she does not feel, checks her phone, and tells herself the same thing she told herself on the bus ride over. You are not asking for charity, you are offering work. The elevator ride feels like a slow climb into someone else's world. Floor numbers flash, 30, 41, 52, and with each chime, her stomach tightens, not from nerves, but from a familiar memory of being looked through instead of looked at. When the doors open, the air is cooler, cleaner, almost sterile. A receptionist in a sleek black dress doesn't stand up, doesn't smile, just gestures toward a hallway lined with framed magazine covers. Faces of men who look like they have never been told no. Ms. Ellison, the receptionist says, like it's a question and an accusation at the same time. Mara nods. She follows the hallway to a conference room with walls of glass and a view of the city that makes everything below look small enough to own. Inside, a man sits at the far end of a long table like the table was built for him, broad shoulders in a tailored suit, watch glinting, fingers tapping once, twice, a steady beat that says he is already bored. His eyes lift to her for half a second, not to see her, but to evaluate. This is Julian Cross. Even if you've never met him, you know the type. Billionaire, headline, myth. The kind of man people whisper about like money makes you untouchable. He doesn't stand. He doesn't offer a hand. He doesn't say, nice to meet you. He flips open a file with her name on it, like she is paperwork. Mara Ellison. He says, slow, measured, like he's tasting the syllables and deciding if they're worth keeping. Sit. The chair feels too heavy, too elegant, and she sits anyway, placing her folder neatly in front of her because she refuses to look like she doesn't belong. Julian's gaze drops to her shoes, scuffed at the toe, and then to her hands, where the skin is dry from cheap soap and too many double shifts. His mouth twitches, a smile that doesn't reach his eyes. Let's save time, he says. I don't do sob stories. Mara keeps her face still. She has learned that any emotion, even polite nervousness, can be used against you. I'm not here to give you one, she replies. Her voice comes out calm, surprising even her. Julian leans back as if he's entertained. He asks questions that barely qualify as questions, more like traps dressed up as conversation. Why should I hire you? What makes you think you can keep up? Do you understand discretion? Mara answers each one, short, clear, honest. She talks about experience, about reliability, about showing up early and staying late, because that is what survival looks like. She does not mention the overdue rent notice folded in her wallet. She does not mention the pharmacy receipt she keeps rereading because the number at the bottom feels like a sentence. She does not mention that she skipped breakfast so she could afford the bus fare. She just meets his eyes and stays there, because she refuses to shrink. Julian glances at his phone, then at the file, then back at her, and there's a moment, one sharp, quiet moment, where it's obvious he has decided something. He sets the file down with a soft slap and folds his hands. You're confident, he says. That's cute. Mara doesn't move. This position gets a lot of applicants, he continues. A lot. He pauses, and the pause is deliberate, like he wants her to fill it with desperation. When she doesn't, he smiles wider, almost pleased with himself. You're not special, Julian says, each word clean and cruel. I can find 48 more. He tilts his head, watching her like he's watching an experiment. Go ahead, he adds, voice dipped in amusement. React. For a beat. Mara hears her own heartbeat in her ears, loud enough to drown out the hum of the building. She feels the old instinct rise, explain, soften, bargain, because that's what people without money are trained to do. But then something colder and steadier cuts through it. Not anger. Not pride. Dignity. The kind that doesn't yell. The kind that simply refuses. Mara's fingers rest on the edge of her folder. She closes it slowly, the sound small but final. She stands. Julian's smirk holds, waiting for the pleading he's used to, waiting for the please, sir, waiting for her to prove his point by needing him. Instead, Mara slides the folder into her bag, straightens her coat, and looks at him like he's just another man who never learned the difference between power and worth. People aren't inventory, she says, quiet enough that he has to lean forward to hear it. Her eyes don't blink. And I'm not a number you get to count. Julian's eyebrows lift, the first crack in his control. Excuse me, he says, as if he's never been spoken to like that on the 52nd floor of his own building. Mara doesn't argue. She doesn't defend. She doesn't give him the satisfaction of a scene. She turns toward the door, and every step feels like walking away from a paycheck, and toward herself. Her hand finds the handle. Behind her, Julian's voice follows, still smooth, still mocking, but with something else hiding. Underneath it now. That's it, he calls. You're walking out. Mara opens the door. The hallway air hits her face like a clean slap. She doesn't turn around. She doesn't have to. Go ahead, Julian says again, softer this time, like he's trying to convince himself. I can find 48 more. Mara steps out cold, and the door clicks shut behind her with the kind of finality that makes even a billionaire sit a little straighter, because for the first time all day, he isn't the one ending the conversation. Mara does not stop walking until the elevator doors swallow her, and the soft music in the lobby can no longer reach her. Only then does she let herself inhale, slow and controlled, like she is holding the line between who she is and what the world keeps trying to turn her into. The street hits her with winter air and horn noise, and people moving like her humiliation never happened, like it was a tiny, forgettable thing on the 52nd floor. But for Mara, it is not tiny. It is a reminder. It is the same reminder she has carried since she was 16 and learned that some people do not ask if you can handle the weight. They just put it on your shoulders and watch what breaks first. She walks toward the bus stop, her thrift store coat flapping at the hem, and she keeps her face neutral because she has had enough of giving strangers the satisfaction of reading her. Her phone buzzes, and she already knows what it is before she looks. Her mother. Mara answers anyway. Hey, Mom, she says, making her voice warm, because her mother does not deserve the coldness the world gave her daughter. Did you make it? Her mother asks, and the hope in that question slices deeper than Julian Cross ever could. Mara looks at the traffic and the glossy tower behind her, and she lies with kindness. They are still interviewing people, she says. It took longer than I thought. Her mother exhales, relieved, and starts talking about nothing and everything, like the neighbor's dog getting loose again, like the pharmacy being out of the generic brand, like how she is fine, she is fine, she is fine. Mara listens and smiles in the right places while her chest tightens, because she knows what that word really means in her mother's mouth. Fine means tired. Fine means pain. Fine means do not worry, even when you should. When she hangs up, Mara stands under the bus shelter and stares at her reflection in the smeared plexiglass. Her eyes look steady. Her mouth looks calm. But her hands are shaking just enough to make her angry at herself. Not for leaving. Never for leaving. For the simple fact that doing the right thing always seems to come with a bill. The bus arrives late, and she pays her fare with coins she counted twice this morning, the kind of coins that sound louder when you are embarrassed. She sits near the back and presses her forehead to the cold window as the city slides by in blurred gray. She thinks about the moment Julian said he could find 48 more, and she imagines all the versions of herself that could have stayed seated and swallowed it. The version who would smile politely and pretend it did not hurt. The version who would pitch her worth like a product. The version who would trade dignity for rent. She hates that she understands those versions. She hates that she could become one of them if life squeezed hard enough. The bus drops her off 3 blocks from the small apartment she shares with her mother, and she walks past a laundromat with flickering lights and a corner store where she knows the cashier by name, because desperation builds community in quiet ways. Upstairs, the apartment smells like rubbing alcohol and old coffee. Her mother is on the couch with a blanket pulled to her chest, trying to look stronger than she feels. Mara hangs her coat carefully, as if neatness can keep life from unraveling. "How did it go?" her mother asks again, and Mara pauses just long enough to choose her words. "It was not a fit," Mara says. "Simple. Clean. No details. No poison." Her mother's eyes lower, and she nods like she is used to disappointment. That is what makes Mara's throat burn. "We will find something else," her mother whispers. Mara goes into the tiny kitchen, opens the refrigerator, and does the quick math of survival. A carton of eggs, half a gallon of milk, leftover rice, and a bottle of cheap hot sauce that is doing most of the emotional labor these days. She cracks 2 eggs into a pan because her mother needs protein, and she tells herself she will eat later. While the eggs cook, she checks the mail slot. There is one envelope, thicker than the others, with red lettering that makes her stomach drop. Final notice. She does not open it yet. She sets it on the counter and stares at it like it is a living thing. For a second, anger rises, hot and reckless. She thinks about that glass conference room, about the view that looked like the city belonged to him, about the way he smiled when he tried to shrink her. She imagines marching back up there and throwing the envelope on his table and saying, "See, this is what your game costs, people." But she does not. She flips the eggs, plates them, carries the dish to her mother, and sits beside her like a shield. "Eat," Mara says softly. Her mother takes a bite and forces a smile. "You are too good to this world," her mother murmurs. Mara looks down at her own hands, the same hands Julian judged without knowing anything about what they have held, what they have cleaned, what they have built. "No," Mara says, voice low and firm. "I am just not for sale." And somewhere, 52 floors above the city, Julian Cross sits in silence, staring at an empty chair across from him, because for the first time in a long time, someone walked away from his power and made it feel small. Mara barely sleeps that night. Not because of Julian Cross, not because of the way his smirk tried to turn her into something small, but because the world does not pause just because you chose dignity. At 6 in the morning, her alarm rattles the nightstand, and she is already awake, staring at the ceiling and listening to her mother breathe in the next room, counting each inhale like it is a promise. She rises quietly, washes her face in cold water, and pulls on the same thrift store coat because it is the warmest thing she owns. The kitchen counter still holds the thick envelope with red lettering. Final notice. She opens it now, slow and steady, reading every line even though her stomach already knows the outcome. 3 days. That is all they are giving her. 3 days before they change the locks and call it policy. Mara folds the paper and slides it into her folder, the same folder that held her resume yesterday, because life has a way of stacking documents until you feel like you are living inside a file cabinet. She writes a list on the back of a grocery receipt. Call the landlord, ask for an extension, pick up extra shifts, apply to at least 5 jobs, sell the old necklace she never wears. Do not let mom see the red letters. The last one is underlined twice. Later, at the community clinic, she sits beside her mother while a nurse reads numbers and schedules another follow-up. The nurse is kind, but kindness does not erase the cost, and Mara watches her mother nod and smile as if pain is a normal errand. On the way out, Mara stops at the pharmacy window and asks about payment plans. The pharmacist gives her that look, the one people give when they think you are about to break. Mara does not break. She thanks him and leaves, holding her jaw tight all the way to the bus stop. By noon, she is back on her phone, calling staffing agencies, printing copies of her resume at the public library, filling out online applications with questions that feel designed to punish you for not having time to be anything except tired. In the late afternoon, she changes into her work shirt and heads to her second job, a small 24-hour diner wedged between a car wash and a pawn shop. The air inside smells like coffee, fried onions, and survival. Mara ties her apron, pins her name tag straight, and tells herself that tonight she will make enough tips to buy time. Not freedom, just time. The dinner rush comes and goes. Couples argue in low voices. A man at the counter complains that his steak is too well done. A teenage server cries in the back and wipes her face fast before returning to the floor. Mara moves through it all with calm efficiency, refilling water, balancing plates, smiling when required, because she has learned that professionalism is often the only armor a poor woman is allowed to wear. Near closing, her manager pulls her aside and murmurs that the schedule might get cut next week. Nothing personal, he says, as if those words make it less personal. Mara nods and tells him she understands. When she steps back into the dining room, her eyes catch her reflection in the dark window. Same coat, same tired eyes, same quiet determination. She reaches into her pocket and touches the edge of the folded final notice, grounding herself with the paper like it is a weight she can hold without dropping. Across town, Julian Cross stands in his penthouse kitchen, staring at a glass of water he has not touched. He has replayed the moment she stood up in his conference room more times than he can count, not because he is angry, but because he is unsettled. He has built an empire on control, on predicting what people will do when you apply pressure, and Mara Ellison did the one thing his system did not account for. She walked away without begging. He tells himself it should not matter. He tells himself she was simply stubborn. But the truth claws at him anyway. She did not look stubborn. She looked certain. Near midnight, Julian calls his assistant and asks for the applicant file again. Not the summary, not the notes, the full file. When it arrives, he reads it like a man searching for a flaw that will make his worldview feel safe again. He finds no scandal, no hidden wealth, no dramatic lie, only boring facts that somehow feel louder than any sob story. 2 jobs, consistent attendance, good references, a gap explained by family illness. At the bottom, a handwritten line from the receptionist. She did not flinch. Julian sets the file down, and for the first time in years he wonders if his test has been filtering out weakness or filtering out integrity. He stares at Mara's name, then at the city lights below, and makes a decision that feels irrational and inevitable. He will see her again, but not behind glass, not across a long table, not as a number. He will meet her where she lives, where people have no reason to perform for him, where her dignity will not be a theory. And while Mara pours fresh coffee into a pot that never seems to empty, she does not know that the man who tried to humiliate her has just stepped out of his world and into hers, and that by tomorrow night, the door to her diner will open and change everything. The next night, the diner feels the same as always, which is to say it feels like people trying to outrun their lives with coffee and fluorescent light. The winter wind keeps slipping in every time the door opens, and Mara keeps wiping down tables and refilling mugs like routine can protect her from the clock counting down in her pocket. The final notice is still folded in her apron, pressed flat like a secret bruise. She has learned to carry bad news close to her body, where it cannot be stolen. Around 9:30, the crowd thins. A truck driver pays in crumpled bills. A couple in a booth argues in whispers and leaves without touching their fries. The cook hums under his breath, the same tune he always hums when the grill is finally cooling. Mara is stacking plates when the door opens and the bell above it gives a small tired ring. She does not look up at first. She can tell what kind of customer someone is by the sound of their footsteps. These steps are lighter than most, measured but not entitled, like someone who is trying to blend in and is not used to needing to. When she lifts her eyes, she sees a man in a dark hoodie and a cheap knit cap pulled low, shoulders slightly hunched against the cold. He looks ordinary at a glance, almost forgettable, except for the way his gaze takes in the room with quiet calculation, like he is memorizing it. Mara feels a flicker of recognition she cannot place. He chooses a booth near the window, not the best seat, not the worst, the kind of seat someone picks when they want to see without being seen. Mara grabs a menu and walks over, professional face on, voice neutral. Hey, coffee. The man looks up, and the diner lights hit his features in a way that makes Mara's stomach tighten. It is him, Julian Cross. Not in a suit, not behind glass, but the same eyes, the same composed stillness, the same mouth that once shaped the words that tried to cut her down. For half a second, Mara cannot move. Then she does the only thing that makes sense. She keeps her expression flat. No surprise, no fear, no performance. Coffee, she repeats, as if he is just another customer, and not the reason she went home yesterday carrying an invisible bruise. Julian's throat shifts as if he expected her to flinch. Yes, he says. Black. Mara writes nothing down because she does not need to. She turns without a word and walks to the counter, pouring coffee into a mug with steady hands. Her pulse is loud, but her posture does not change. She brings the mug back and sets it down gently. Julian watches her fingers, the way they do not shake, the way they do not reach for him or recoil. You work here, he says, and it is not a question. Mara meets his eyes. I work wherever I have to, she replies. Julian nods once, as if filing that away. He picks up the mug, takes a sip, and his face tightens for the smallest moment. Not because the coffee is bad, but because he is not used to tasting something that does not cater to him. I did not expect to see you, he says carefully. Mara gives him a look that says the feeling is not mutual. Neither did I, she answers. A silence stretches between them, filled with the hiss of the coffee machine and the distant clatter of dishes in the kitchen. Julian sets the mug down. Yesterday, he begins, and Mara lifts one hand, palm slightly raised, not rude, just firm. I am on shift, she says. If you are here to continue your game, you can do it somewhere else. Julian's jaw tightens. The word game lands like an accusation that fits too well. I am not here to humiliate you, he says, and for the first time his voice sounds less like a verdict and more like a man trying to be believed. Mara does not soften. Then why are you here? She asks. Julian looks around the diner, at the scratched tables, at the tired neon sign buzzing in the window, at the people who do not recognize him and would not care if they did. He lowers his voice. I wanted to understand, he says. Mara's lips press together. Understand what? Julian's eyes flick to her name tag. You, he admits. The honesty in that single word almost throws Mara off balance, but she catches herself fast. You already decided what I was, she says, voice low. A number. A reaction. Something you could replace. Julian's mouth opens, then closes, as if he is tasting the truth and finding it bitter. I was wrong, he says, and the words do not come with a grand apology or a dramatic plea. They come out simple, almost reluctant, like he is not used to letting them exist. Mara studies him for a long moment. She remembers the long table, the glass walls, the way he smiled when he tried to push her into desperation. She also sees the difference now. He is sitting in a booth with a cheap mug of coffee, no audience, no advantage, no script. It does not erase what he did, but it makes something else possible. If you were wrong, Mara says slowly, then prove it by leaving me alone. Julian swallows. I cannot, he says, and there is a quiet tension in his face that looks like discomfort with his own need. Mara's eyes narrow. That sounds like your problem, she replies. Julian nods once, as if accepting the hit. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out cash, and places it on the table. The bill is crisp, too crisp, like money that has never been desperate. Mara does not touch it. Your coffee is $3.12, she says evenly. Julian looks at her, then at the bill. Keep the rest, he says. Mara's voice stays calm, but her words are steel. I do not take pity tips, she says. Pay what you owe. Nothing more. For a beat, Julian looks like he does not know what to do with a boundary he cannot buy. Then he folds the bill, pulls smaller bills from his pocket, and counts out exact change, slow and deliberate, like a man learning a new language. Mara takes the $3.12, sets it in the register, and returns the coins that remain. There, she says. Now you owe me nothing. Julian watches her walk away, and something in his expression shifts, not anger, not amusement, but a dawning realization that the only way to get close to Mara Ellison is not through power, but through humility, and he has never had to use that muscle before. Julian does not come back the next day. That is the first surprise. Mara expects him to return like most powerful men do, convinced that persistence is the same as sincerity, but the booth by the window stays empty, and the only bell she hears is the one over the door announcing tired people and colder weather. Part of her is relieved. Another part of her is irritated by the fact that she is even thinking about him at all. She tells herself it was a fluke, a rich man bored enough to cosplay humility for a night, and she focuses on what is real, the landlord's deadline, her mother's prescriptions, the ache in her feet at the end of every shift. 2 mornings later, Mara is at the bus stop before sunrise, breath clouding in the air, when she hears a voice behind her ask, "Is this the line for the downtown route?" She turns, ready to ignore whoever it is, and freezes. Julian stands there in a plain gray jacket, no designer logo, no polished driver, no security detail. His hands are in his pockets like he has nowhere else to put them. His hair is slightly mussed by the wind. He looks like a man who slept badly and made a decision anyway. Mara's first instinct is to walk away. She almost does. Then she remembers her own rule. Do not react for someone else's entertainment. She faces him fully, expression flat. "Yes," she says. "It is." Julian nods as if he is taking the bus because of the bus, not because of her. A silence settles between them, heavy and awkward, and the city keeps moving around it. When the bus arrives, they board with everyone else, swiping fares, taking whatever seats are open. Julian ends up standing, gripping the overhead strap like he is not sure how much force is normal. Mara sits halfway back, staring out the window, refusing to look at him. At the next stop, an older woman climbs aboard carrying 2 grocery bags that look too heavy for her thin arms. The driver does not move. No one does. Mara starts to stand, but Julian is faster. He steps forward, gently takes one bag, and says, "May I help you?" The woman studies him suspiciously, then shrugs and lets him carry the bag to a seat. Julian does not make a show of it. He does not glance around for approval. He just does it. Mara watches from her seat, and she hates that her chest loosens a fraction, because it means she is still capable of being surprised. When Julian returns to his spot, he does not look at Mara like he expects a gold star. He just grips the strap again, eyes forward. 2 stops later, a man in a wrinkled suit cuts in front of a teenage boy and snatches the last open seat. The boy stands with his backpack pressed to his chest, jaw clenched, pretending it does not bother him. Julian notices. He hesitates, then steps aside and offers his own spot near the pole, giving the boy more space. It is small, almost nothing. But Mara has lived in the world of almost nothing long enough to know that small choices reveal big truths. Still, she does not forgive him. Not yet. Not because she is cruel, but because she has learned that forgiveness given too quickly becomes permission. When Mara gets off near the library, Julian follows at a distance, not crowding, not touching, just walking like he is letting her set the pace. At the corner, she finally stops and turns. "What are you doing?" she asks. Her voice is quiet, but there is a blade in it. Julian keeps his hands visible. "Learning," he says. Mara lets out a short breath that is almost a laugh. "Learning what?" "How people live without penthouses." Julian's eyes flicker at the word penthouses, and for a second she thinks he will deny it, but he does not. "I already know what I have," he says. "I did not know what I lacked." Mara studies him, looking for the usual defenses, charm, excuses, a story designed to make her feel guilty for being angry. She finds none of that. She finds discomfort. Humility, maybe, but she does not trust it yet. "You think riding a bus makes you a better man?" she asks. Julian shakes his head once. "No," he says. "I think listening might." Mara's fingers tighten around her folder. The final notice is inside. The red letters feel hotter against her palm. "I am not your lesson," she says. Julian's gaze holds steady. "I do not want you to be," he replies. "I want you to be the person you already are. I just want the chance to earn the right to speak to you without hiding behind a conference table." Mara's throat tightens, not from emotion she is willing to name, but from the shock of being addressed like a human rather than a target. She looks away, then back. "One rule," she says. "You do not get to buy your way into my life. No gifts. No pity. No favors." Julian nods, immediate. "Agreed," he says. "Then why are you here?" Mara asks. "Because she needs the truth spoken out loud." Julian exhales, and when he speaks, his voice is quieter than she has ever heard it. "Because when you walked out," he says, "it did not feel like you lost. It felt like I did." Mara does not answer. She turns toward the library steps, and for the first time she does not tell him to leave. She does not invite him either. She simply allows the moment to exist, balanced on the edge of what might become a second chance, and Julian follows a few steps behind, learning that the distance between them cannot be crossed with money, only with patience. Mara tells herself she is only letting Julian walk beside her because it is easier than arguing with a man who is finally willing to hear the word no. But the truth is more complicated, and she hates complicated. Over the next few days, he appears in the edges of her routine with a kind of careful restraint that feels almost foreign. He does not show up at her apartment. He does not demand her time. He does not send flowers or money or perform generosity like a spotlight. He simply exists where she already is, like he is trying to learn her world without rearranging it. One evening he is outside the diner at the end of her shift, leaning against the brick wall with his hands in his pockets, looking like he has been standing in the cold longer than he should. Mara steps out, exhausted, and stops short. "Do you have a hobby now?" she asks, dry and guarded. Julian lifts his shoulders in a small shrug. "I read the menu," he says. "Apparently your pie is famous." Mara almost laughs, but she does not give him the satisfaction. "If you want pie, go inside," she says. "Do not stand out here like a guilty conscience." Julian nods, and for once he does exactly what she says. He follows her into the diner, orders a slice of apple pie, and pays for it like everyone else, counting bills instead of flashing a card. He eats slowly, listening more than speaking, watching the way. Mara moves through the room with the quiet competence of someone who cannot afford to be careless. When a customer snaps his fingers at her like she is an appliance, Mara does not flinch. She straightens, sets down the coffee pot, and says, "I will help you when you speak to me like a person." The man scoffs, ready to escalate, but something about Mara's steady gaze makes him back down. Julian sees it, and his jaw tightens with something close to shame. Later, when the diner empties and the cook turns off the grill, Julian walks Mara to the bus stop without asking. The wind is sharp, and Mara keeps her coat pulled tight, thinking about the final notice burning in her pocket like a countdown. Julian notices her distraction. "You have been holding your breath all week," he says quietly. Mara keeps her eyes forward. "I am fine," she replies, and she hears her mother's voice inside the same word, the same lie. Julian does not push. He just stands there beside her while the streetlights hum and a bus wheezes past without stopping because it is full. Another bus is 15 minutes away. Mara shifts her weight, cold seeping into her shoes. Julian looks at her hands, then at the thinness of her coat, and he does something so small it almost hurts. He takes off his own jacket and holds it out without a speech. Mara stares at it like it is a trap. "Do not," she says. Julian's hand does not move closer. He just holds it there, offering, not insisting. "It is cold," he says. That is all. Mara's eyes narrow. "No pity," she reminds him. Julian nods once. "Not pity," he says. "Respect." The word lands heavier than the jacket. Mara wants to refuse on principle, but her fingers are stiff, and she thinks about her mother coughing at night, and she thinks about how pride does not keep you warm. She takes the jacket and slips it on, keeping her expression neutral. It smells faintly like soap and winter air, not cologne, not luxury, just clean. Julian looks away as if he is giving her privacy to accept kindness without feeling watched. When the bus finally arrives, Mara steps on, then pauses at the top of the stairs and looks back. Julian stands on the sidewalk, hands shoved into his pockets now, shoulders bracing against the cold. "You are going to freeze," she says. Julian gives a small half-smile. "I will survive," he replies. Mara hesitates, then reaches into her bag and pulls out her worn scarf, the one she has had since high school. The fabric is thin, frayed at the edges, but it has kept her warm through years that did not care if she made it. She tosses it to him without ceremony. Julian catches it, surprised. "That is yours," he says. Mara steps fully onto the bus. "Then bring it back," she says, and the doors fold shut between them. She sits by the window, watching him through the glass as the bus pulls away. Julian stands there holding her scarf like it is something sacred, and Mara hates how her chest feels too tight, because she knows what just happened. She did not forgive him. She did not forget. But she allowed a moment of humanity to pass between them, and that is dangerous, because it means he is no longer just the billionaire who smirked. He is the man standing alone in the cold with her scarf around his neck, learning that the only warmth that matters is the kind you earn. Mara tries to keep life simple after that night with the scarf, because simplicity is how you survive when everything else is uncertain, but the city has a way of pulling strings you do not see. The next morning her mother wakes with a rough cough that does not sound like a cold, and Mara takes her to the community clinic before her shift, sitting beside her with a paper cup of water and a calm face that feels glued on. In the waiting area, a bulletin board is covered in flyers for free food pantries, blood drives, and job fairs, and one glossy poster stands out like it was printed in a different universe. Crossline Foundation Community Career Day. Free resume help. On-the-spot interviews. Transportation vouchers. A line at the bottom reads, "We believe dignity is the first step to stability." Mara stares at that sentence until it feels like it is staring back. Her mother follows her gaze and whispers, "You should go." Mara almost says no out of habit. She almost says they do not have time. Then the final notice flashes in her mind like a red warning light. 3 days does not leave room for pride. It barely leaves room for sleep. That afternoon, after her diner shift, Mara changes in the restroom, smoothing her blouse in the mirror, pinning her hair back with a clip that has lost most of its shine. She prints 3 fresh resumes at the library, folds them carefully, and boards the bus to the address on the flyer, feeling the old tightness in her chest that comes from walking into spaces that were not built for you. The building is not the glass tower from Julian's office, but it is still polished, still expensive in a way that feels quiet and intentional. Outside, banners ripple in the cold wind. Volunteers in matching jackets hand out coffee and direct people into lines that wrap around the corner. Mara steps into the crowd and sees faces like hers, tired but hopeful, people clutching folders and wearing their best clothes like armor. For a moment, she feels less alone, and that almost makes her angry, because community should not require desperation to form. Inside, the lobby has been transformed into stations, interview tables, resume printers, a wall of job postings. A woman at a check-in table smiles warmly and says, "Welcome," like she means it. Mara gives her name, receives a badge, and follows the flow toward a cluster of interview booths. Her heart pounds, but she keeps her shoulders squared. She tells herself she is here for work, not pride, not revenge, not closure. Then the lights dim slightly, and a hush spreads through the room the way water spreads across a floor. A staff member steps onto a small stage and taps a microphone. "Thank you for coming," she says. "Before we begin interviews, we have a brief introduction from our founder." Founder? Mara's stomach drops, because her mind immediately supplies a name it does not want to say. The staff member smiles wider, voice bright. "Please welcome Julian Cross, founder and chief executive officer of Crossline Group." Applause erupts like a wave. People stand. Phones lift. Heads turn toward the stage with a kind of reverence Mara has never understood. And then he walks out. Julian. The same man who held out his jacket at the bus stop. The same man who stood on the sidewalk wearing her scarf. The same man who sat in a diner booth counting out $3.12 like he was learning humility by hand. He is not wearing a hoodie now. He is in a tailored suit, crisp and precise, the billionaire version of himself that the world recognizes and obeys. The room changes around him, like the air becomes heavier with status. Mara stands frozen in the middle of the crowd, her badge suddenly feeling like a joke on her chest. Julian steps to the microphone and smiles the kind of controlled public smile that used to make her skin crawl. His eyes scan the room, moving over faces, over cameras, over volunteers, and then they land on Mara. For a fraction of a second, his expression slips. It is so small most people would miss it, but Mara does not. She sees it because she has been watching him in places where he could not hide. The slip is not fear. It is something worse for a man like him. It is accountability. Julian clears his throat. "I started this foundation because I have spent years measuring people by numbers," he says, voice steady, practiced, amplified. "Profit margins, productivity, rankings." A few people nod like they are listening to wisdom. Mara feels her hands curl into fists. Julian continues, and his gaze stays anchored in Mara's direction like a confession aimed at one person. "But the truth is, dignity cannot be quantified. If you take it from someone, you do not become stronger. You become smaller." The words hit the room like a polished speech. They hit Mara like a memory of a smirk across a long table. "You are not special. I can find 48 more." Her chest tightens so hard it hurts. Julian finishes with a promise about opportunity and fairness, and the applause returns, louder now. People clapping for a man they think just invented compassion. Mara cannot clap. She cannot breathe. She turns and pushes through the crowd, heading for the side hallway where volunteers are passing out water. Her eyes sting. but she refuses to let tears fall in public. She is not giving anyone that. She makes it to a quiet corridor near a service door, and that is where she hears his footsteps behind her, faster than before, urgent. Mara. Julian calls softly, like her name is not a weapon in his mouth. Mara spins around. So this is what it is, she says, voice low and shaking with restrained fury. A charity event. A speech. A performance. You ride the bus for a week and suddenly you are a hero. Julian stops a few feet away, hands open, posture careful, like he knows he does not deserve to come closer. It is not a performance, he says. Mara laughs once, sharp and humorless. You stood on a stage while people clapped for you, she says. You let them clap. And all I could hear was you telling me you could find 48 more. Julian's face tightens as if the words physically strike him. I was wrong, he says again, but this time it sounds smaller in the empty hallway than it did in the diner. Mara steps closer, not to soften, but to make sure he hears every syllable. You did not just insult me, she says. You tried to train me to accept disrespect. You try to make me prove my worth by staying seated. Julian swallows. I know, he says. Mara's eyes lock on his. Then tell me the truth, she demands. Did you come to the diner because you felt guilty, or because you could not stand that I walked away? Julian does not answer immediately, and that pause feels like the most honest thing he has done yet. When he finally speaks, his voice is barely above a breath. Both, he admits. Mara's jaw tightens, because part of her respects the honesty and part of her hates that she does. Julian takes a careful step back, giving her space instead of taking it. I cannot erase what I did, he says. But I can stop being the man who does it. Mara stares at him, the billionaire on one side of the hallway, the waitress with an eviction notice on the other, and she realizes the real reveal is not that he is powerful. She already knew that. The real reveal is that he is trying to change, and change is terrifying, because it means her cold exit might not be the end of this story. It might be the beginning. Julian does not follow Mara deeper into the hallway after he admits the truth. He does something that shocks her more than any speech ever could. He stops. He lets silence stand between them. He lets her breathe without chasing her reaction like a prize. For a moment, the noise of the event fades behind the service door, muffled applause and polite chatter, and all Mara can hear is the steady hum of the building and her own pulse refusing to calm down. You cannot stop being that man with words, Mara says, voice tight. You stop by paying the price. Julian nods, as if he expected that answer. Tell me what the price is, he says. Mara's eyes narrow. That is the problem, she replies. You think there is always a price you can pay and then you get to move on. Julian's jaw shifts. No, he says carefully. I think there is a cost I owe, and I do not get to decide when I am done paying it. Mara studies him, searching for the old smirk. It does not appear. She turns away from him, pressing her palm to the cool wall, grounding herself in something solid. I am leaving, she says. Julian does not argue. I understand, he replies. I will not stop you. That is the second shock. Mara pushes the service door open and steps back into the lobby where volunteers guide lines and hopeful people clutch resumes like lifelines. She walks through the crowd with her face composed, but inside she feels raw, like the world has peeled off a layer she needed for protection. She exits the building into cold air and waits at the curb for the bus, the city's noise swallowing her thoughts. She tells herself she is done. She tells herself she will never let a billionaire turn her life into a moral lesson again. Then her phone buzzes. A text from her landlord. If rent is not paid by Friday at noon, you are out. No extensions. Mara stares at the screen until the words blur. Friday. That is tomorrow. The bus arrives, and she rides home with the eviction notice in her pocket and humiliation in her throat, refusing to let it become tears. When she gets to the apartment, her mother is asleep on the couch, a heating pad pressed to her side. Mara sits at the kitchen table and counts cash, diner tips, a few crumpled bills, spare change in a jar. It is not enough. It was never going to be enough. She presses her forehead to her hands and forces herself to breathe quietly so she will not wake her mother. At midnight, another message arrives, not from the landlord. An email from Crossline Foundation with a subject line that makes her stomach flip. Community Career Day follow-up. She almost deletes it. Then she opens it, expecting a generic thank you. Instead, it is direct, and it uses her name. It says the foundation reviewed her resume and invites her to a paid training program for administrative operations, starting immediately, with a stipend and transportation support. At the bottom is a line. Participation is voluntary and not contingent on any personal interaction. Mara reads that line twice, because it feels like it was written for her boundaries, not for the foundation. She closes her laptop and sits in the dark, suspicious of Hope. The next morning she goes to work anyway, because Hope does not pay bills until it becomes action. During her shift, her manager waves her over and mutters that someone called about her schedule, asking what it would take to keep her hours steady. The manager looks annoyed, like he hates being asked to treat an employee like a person. I told them you are reliable, he says grudgingly. Whoever it is, they got money and they sound serious. Mara's stomach twists. She knows exactly who it is. She finishes her shift and steps outside into the cold. Across the street, Julian is there, but not close, not blocking her path. He stands by a bus stop sign, hands in his pockets, wearing her scarf again. He does not wave. He does not approach. He simply waits like someone who has finally learned that showing up does not mean taking over. Mara walks toward him, anger and exhaustion tangled in her chest. Did you do this? She asks, holding up her phone with the email open. Julian's eyes flick to the screen, then back to her face. I asked the foundation team to create an option, he says. Not for you specifically. For anyone who needs a bridge. Mara scoffs. That is a lie, she says. Julian does not flinch. It is the truth, he replies. I did not sign you up. I did not attach your decision to me. I made sure you could say no without consequences. Mara steps closer until she can see the strain in his eyes, the lack of sleep, the quiet determination. You think that fixes it? She whispers. Julian shakes his head. No, he says. I think it starts to. Mara's breath shakes. I told you no gifts, she says, voice breaking on the last word. Julian's voice stays steady. Then do not take it as a gift, he says. Take it as access that should have existed without my name attached. Mara's eyes sting, and she hates that she understands what he is trying to do. He is not handing her a check in public. He is not buying her silence. He is building a door and then stepping aside. Julian takes a small step back, giving her the space to choose without pressure. If you never speak to me again, I will accept that, he says. But I will not accept being the man who can watch someone lose their home and call it not my problem. Mara stares at him, and for the first time she sees the true shape of his redemption. Not romance, not guilt, but accountability with no guarantee of reward. She lowers her phone slowly. If I take this, she says, it is not because of you. Julian nods once. Good, he answers. Mara's jaw tightens, and she forces the words out like a boundary carved in stone. And if you ever smirk at someone like that again, she says, I will walk out colder than I did the first time. Julian's eyes hold hers, and there is no smirk now, only agreement. You should, he says, and I will deserve it. Mara does not sleep much that night, but for the first time in weeks it is not panic that keeps her awake, it is decision. She reads the foundation email again at the kitchen table while her mother dozes on the couch, the lamp casting a soft circle of light over unpaid bills and a half-empty bottle of cough syrup. The words on the screen are careful, structured to protect her dignity, and Mara recognizes something strange in that. Someone thought about her boundaries before thinking about their own comfort. At dawn, she makes coffee, packs her mother's morning pills into a little organizer, and calls the landlord with a voice so steady it almost sounds like someone else's. I will have payment by noon, she says, and she does not explain how, because she refuses to beg for basic mercy. She hangs up, puts on her coat, and boards the bus with her folder tucked under her arm. She does not text Julian. She does not ask for anything. She goes to Crossline Foundation because the offer is a bridge, and she is tired of drowning. The training program is not glamorous. It is fluorescent lights, printed packets, and a room full of people who look like they have been holding their breath for a long time. A coordinator welcomes them, hands out schedules, explains stipends and transportation vouchers, and says something that makes Mara's throat tighten. This is not charity. This is access. You earned your seat by showing up. Mara sits at a table and learns practical skills, scheduling systems, basic payroll software, professional communication, how to handle conflict without losing yourself. She is good at it. not because she is special, but because she has been organizing chaos her whole life. During a break, she steps into the hallway and sees Julian standing at the far end, not inside the room, not intruding, just waiting like a man who finally understands distance. He does not approach until she chooses to walk toward him. "You came," he says quietly. Mara stops an arm's length away. "I needed a bridge," she answers. "Do not confuse that with forgiveness." Julian nods once. "I will not," he says. "How is your mother?" The question is gentle, not investigative. Mara hesitates, then answers because honesty is not weakness. "She is trying," Mara says. Julian's gaze softens, and he looks away for a second like he is fighting the instinct to fix everything with money. When he looks back, his voice is firm. "If you ever feel pressured here, by anyone, you tell me," he says. Mara's eyes harden. "No," she corrects him. "If I ever feel pressured here, I tell the program director and I walk out. You do not get to be my savior." Julian swallows and nods again, taking the correction like it belongs to him. "You are right," he says. "Thank you." That afternoon, Mara finishes early, collects her stipend paperwork, and rides the bus straight to the landlord's office. Her hands tremble only once when she places the envelope on the counter, but her voice stays calm. "Rent," she says. The landlord counts it, surprised, and grunts something that is not an apology. Mara does not wait for gratitude. She walks out into the cold with her head high because she did not sell her dignity to stay housed. She took an opportunity designed to exist without humiliation. When she gets home, her mother sees the relief on Mara's face and starts to cry, the quiet kind of cry that comes from fear finally loosening its grip. Mara holds her, rocking slightly, and whispers, "We are okay," until the words become true. Weeks pass. Mara continues the program, then transitions into a paid role supporting community outreach logistics. She keeps her diner shifts for a while, not because she has to, but because she refuses to forget what it feels like to earn every dollar with aching feet. Julian keeps his distance and keeps his promises. He shows up to meetings with less arrogance, asks questions instead of issuing verdicts. And when someone in a conference room dismisses a junior employee with a cutting joke, Julian does something that makes the room freeze. He stops the conversation and says, "People are not inventory. We do not talk that way here." Mara hears about it from a coworker and says nothing, but a small part of her chest warms anyway. One evening, after a long day, Mara steps onto the building's rooftop for air and finds Julian there, alone, hands on the railing, city lights blinking below like restless stars. He turns when he hears her footsteps, and the scarf is around his neck again, her frayed old scarf looking strangely at home on a billionaire. "I brought it back," he says softly, touching the edge of it. Mara walks closer, stopping at the same careful distance he has learned to respect. "You have been bringing it back for weeks," she says. Julian's lips twitch, almost a smile, but not the old smirk. "It reminds me," he admits, "of the kind of man I do not want to be anymore." Mara studies his face, the tension softened by time and accountability. "You once said you could find 48 more," she says, voice quiet. Julian's jaw tightens, shame flickering. "I did," he replies. Mara nods slowly. "Here is what you missed," she says. "You can find 48 more employees. You can find 48 more resumes. But you cannot replace the moment you tried to take my dignity, and I refused." Julian's eyes stay on hers, unblinking. "I know," he says. "And I am sorry," without expecting anything back. Silence stretches, calm this time. Mara exhales and makes her choice with clarity, not romance. "I am not special," she says. "I am just not for sale." Julian's voice is steady, almost reverent. "That is exactly what makes you rare," he answers. Mara looks out at the city, then back at him. "If there is ever an us," she says, "it will be built on action and honesty, not status." Julian nods once. "Then let me start with honesty," he says. "I care about you. I respect you. And I will keep choosing to be better, even if you never choose me." Mara's throat tightens, and she lets herself feel it without fear. She reaches up and adjusts the scarf at his collar, a small, simple gesture that says more than any speech. "Then keep choosing," she says. Julian's breath shudders, and he does not touch her until she takes his hand first, fingers threading together in a quiet pact. Below them, the city keeps moving, indifferent and loud, but on that rooftop, something softer wins. A billionaire learns that leadership is not control, love is not ownership, and the only kind of power worth keeping is the kind that kneels before human dignity.